Evelyn David has always been doubted by her peers until a critical mission forces her to prove she has what it takes. But when the colonel sees her tattoo, everything changes. Evelyn Rogue David stood in front of the Apache helicopter, her gaze locked on the cockpit, the massive rotor blades casting long shadows on the tarmac. The sound of the engine, usually a familiar hum, felt like a distant echo today. The heat of the desert sun beat down on her, but it didn't bother her. It was the weight of the doubts, both internal and external, that made her feel heavy. She glanced around the hangar. A few of her fellow pilots were gathered near the briefing room, laughing and joking. Lieutenant Brad Ace Daniels, the loudest of the group, caught her eye and gave her a smirk that she pretended not to notice. She knew what they thought of her: too soft, too small, too much of a rookie. "Rogue, you sure you can handle the G-forces on this thing?" Brad called out over his shoulder, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Evelyn forced a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. She had heard that line 100 times. The others laughed, some of them trying to hide their amusement, but the chuckles were still loud enough for her to hear. Why does this still bother me? Evelyn thought, watching them gather their gear. She had passed every test, aced every simulation. She could fly this Apache like the back of her hand, but nothing ever seemed to be good enough. She clenched her fists, letting out a breath. Evelyn. She turned to find Captain Lucas Link Harper, one of the few who had always believed in her, standing behind her. "You all right?" he asked, his voice soft but concerned. "I'm fine," she said, trying to shake off the tension in her shoulders. "Just thinking." Link raised an eyebrow, a knowing smile tugging at his lips. "Thinking about proving them wrong again, huh?" Evelyn didn't respond. She didn't have to. She could feel Link's understanding without words. He had been there when she first enlisted, when she was the only female in her flight school class. He had seen her push past the insults and the dismissals, striving to show that she had what it took to be just as good, if not better, than the guys. "You're ready," Link said after a long pause. "Don't let them get to you. You know what you're doing." Evelyn nodded, but the doubt crept back in. What if she wasn't ready? What if she couldn't handle it? It wasn't the flying that worried her. It was the fear of letting everyone down again. She glanced at the Apache again. The massive machine seemed to stare back at her, daring her to step into the cockpit, daring her to prove everyone wrong. She had been waiting for this moment her whole life, but now that it was here, she wasn't sure she had the courage to take it. "All right, let's get moving," Link said, clapping her on the shoulder. "You've got this." Evelyn forced a smile as she grabbed her flight helmet and nodded. "Yeah," she muttered to herself, more for her own benefit than his. "I've got this." But as she walked toward the Apache, her legs felt like lead. Little did she know, today wasn't just another test. Today, her world was about to change. Evelyn took her seat in the Apache's cockpit, trying to ignore the clatter of voices from the others as they prepared for the day's briefing. The hum of the helicopter's engine filled the air, grounding her for a moment in the familiar roar. This was her space, the one place where she didn't have to second-guess herself. But the moment she climbed down from the cockpit, reality slammed into her again. "So, Rogue," Brad's voice called out from behind her. "Are you sure you can handle the G-forces on this one? I mean, the last time I saw you pull a turn, I thought you might pass out midair." The chuckles from the rest of the squadron followed. Evelyn bit her lip to keep from showing her frustration. "You'll be fine, right?" Brad added with a grin. "I mean, it's just a helicopter. It's not like it's a fighter jet or something." Her hands tightened around the strap of her flight bag, her nails biting into the leather. She was so sick of this. The mocking looks, the underhanded comments, the constant assumption that she wasn't cut out for this job. "I've handled worse," Evelyn muttered, not bothering to turn around. Her voice was steady, but the words didn't carry the confidence she wanted them to. She couldn't deny it, the constant doubts had started to sink in, like a slow leak in a boat. Brad laughed, the sound too loud, too mocking. "We'll see. I just don't want to be the one pulling you out of the cockpit when you pass out from the GS." "Shut up, Brad," Sergeant Mia Vasquez said, stepping in. Mia, the only woman on the team besides Evelyn, wasn't having it. She shot a glare at Brad. "You don't need to test her, okay?" She'll show you when it's time. Evelyn nodded gratefully to Mia, but her heart wasn't in it. She'd been dealing with this for months now, and Mia's defense was like a tiny shield against a storm. It was better than nothing, but it wasn't enough. Brad and the others still saw her as weak, unfit, and the worst part was, a small part of her wondered if they were right. "All right, enough of this," said Captain Lucas, Link Harper, always the peacekeeper. "Let's focus on the mission." "We'll talk later, Evelyn." Link was trying to make peace, but Evelyn wasn't feeling any better. She stared out at the horizon, forcing herself to take a deep breath. "Why do I keep doing this?" she thought. "Why do I keep pushing myself for these guys who don't even believe I can do it?" But it was more than just proving them wrong. Evelyn wanted this. She wanted to be the best pilot, not for their validation, but for herself. She wasn't just fighting for a spot on the team. She was fighting to show that no one could define her by their limitations. "Ready for the briefing, Rogue?" Link's voice brought her back to reality. "Yeah," she replied quietly, her gaze still fixed on the Apache. The briefing room felt colder than usual. As they filed in, the weight of the conversation that was about to unfold hit Evelyn harder than expected. She kept her gaze straight ahead, avoiding Brad's knowing look. She could almost feel the eyes of the others on her, waiting for her to fail. But she wasn't going to fail. As the briefing continued, Evelyn's focus sharpened. She started visualizing the mission in her mind, calculating every step, every move. She was going to show them. She wasn't going to let Brad or anyone else get inside her head anymore. This time, it wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about proving to herself that she belonged. The heat of the desert sun was even more oppressive now, the midday air shimmering above the tarmac. Evelyn squinted against the glare as she adjusted her flight suit. She stood by the Apache, the familiar roar of the engine comforting her, but the pit in her stomach wasn't going anywhere. The day had been typical so far. Training, briefings, and more of the usual, Brad's snide remarks and the team's general indifference. They'd all been assigned to mock drills for the day, running through simulated attacks that never felt real. It was nothing she couldn't handle, but it didn't matter. The others already had their minds made up. Evelyn was staring at the Apache, lost in thought, when the sharp sound of footsteps pulled her out of her reverie. She turned to see Colonel Jack Ironford approaching, his boots crunching against the gravel. "David," he said, his voice like gravel, deep and stern. "You're with me. We need you up in the air." Evelyn blinked. Colonel Ford, the man who had never shown much interest in her abilities, suddenly wanted her in the cockpit. Her heart skipped a beat. "Sir?" Evelyn asked, trying to mask her surprise. "We've got a situation," Ford said, his face set in grim lines. "The intel just came in. A group of hostile aircraft is moving toward our western border, and we need eyes in the sky. I need you in the Apache." Evelyn's mind raced. Was this a test? Or had they genuinely run out of better options? Either way, her chance had arrived, and it wasn't one she could pass up. She swallowed hard, her throat dry. "Yes, sir," she replied, her voice more steady than she felt. Ford nodded, then gave her a quick once-over. "Don't screw this up, David." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Evelyn standing there, stunned. She quickly moved toward the Apache, her legs feeling like lead. This was it. The moment. The chance she'd been waiting for, but that didn't mean she was prepared. She had trained for this, sure, but this wasn't a simulation. This was real. And if she messed up, she didn't want to think about the consequences. "Everything okay?" Link's voice pulled her out of her thoughts again. He was standing next to her, concern evident in his expression. "Yeah, just a bit unexpected," Evelyn said, her hands tightening around her helmet. "I'm headed up. They want me on the team." Link raised an eyebrow. "You sure you're ready for this?" Evelyn hesitated, then nodded, pushing her doubts to the back of her mind. "I have to be." "Good luck," Link said, giving her a reassuring pat on the shoulder. "Don't let him get to you." Evelyn threw him a quick smile before sliding into the cockpit, strapping herself in. The sound of the Apache's engine firing up filled her ears as she ran through her pre-flight checks. The familiar hum of the rotor blades brought her some comfort, but the reality of what she was about to face was anything but familiar. "All right, Rogue," she whispered to herself, "this is your shot." She took a deep breath and lifted off, the Apache rising into the sky. She felt the vibrations of the helicopter beneath her, the hum of the engine. This was where she belonged. As the desert floor fell away beneath her, Evelyn's nerves tightened, but so did her focus. For the first time that day, she felt completely in control. But she knew the hardest part was still ahead. This mission was only the beginning. Now, she had to prove to everyone, especially herself, that she belonged in the cockpit. She couldn't afford any mistakes. The next few minutes were quiet as she climbed higher into the sky, but she could feel the eyes of the others on her, even from the ground. She had to make this count. The helicopter's blades whipped the air as Evelyn climbed higher into the sky, her heart beating faster with every second. The desert sprawled below her, an endless sea of brown and beige, but the view didn't bring her the calm she was used to. Today, the calm felt distant, like something she might never find again. As she flew toward the mission zone, the tension in her chest only grew. Her fingers gripped the controls tightly, and every movement felt like it was under a magnifying glass. It was as if she could feel the eyes of the entire squadron on her, waiting for her to mess up, waiting for her to prove them right. "Rogue, you copy?" came Link's voice over the comm, his tone steady, but Evelyn could hear the slight edge of concern. "Yeah, I copy," she said, trying to keep her voice as confident as she could manage. Her hands were shaking slightly, but she forced herself to calm down. The radio crackled again, this time Brad's voice cutting in. "You sure you can handle this, David? I mean, you're flying solo here. No backup, no pressure, right?" Evelyn's jaw tightened. She could hear the mockery in Brad's voice, could practically see his smirk on the other end. She wanted to snap back, but she couldn't. Not now. Not when everything was riding on this one mission. Instead, she bit back a sharp retort and forced herself to focus on the task at hand. She looked down at the controls, her fingers sliding over the buttons and levers with practiced ease. She knew what she was doing. But knowing didn't always stop the fear. The miles stretched on, the helicopter slicing through the air, but Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't enough. She remembered the first time she'd flown a helicopter, her father's disappointed gaze when she couldn't keep up with her brothers. She remembered the look on her mother's face when she'd enlisted, as if she had to prove herself, as if she wasn't good enough. "You can do this, Evelyn," she reminded herself. "You've done this 100 times. This is what you're made for." But the voices of doubt kept coming back. What if she wasn't strong enough? What if she froze up in the heat of the moment? What if this was her breaking point? "You good, Rogue?" Link's voice pulled her back to reality. She looked out through the cockpit, watching the horizon slowly begin to darken. "I'm fine," she said, but her voice was barely a whisper. The words felt hollow. She wasn't fine. She was a woman in a man's world, trying to prove to everyone, but more to herself, that she belonged. That she wasn't just here because of some quota or affirmative action, but because she deserved to be. She gripped the controls tighter, feeling the Apache respond to her every command. "You're not weak," she told herself. "You've earned this." Suddenly, the radio crackled again, this time with a more serious tone. "Rogue, we've got incoming. 2 enemy fighters, high altitude. We need you to intercept." Her heart skipped a beat. This is it. The mission she'd been preparing for was here, and there was no turning back. She took a deep breath, forced herself to focus. The doubts had to go. The fear had to go. There was no room for hesitation. "Copy that, Colonel," Evelyn responded, her voice steady now. "I'm on it." The Apache soared toward the incoming fighters, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Evelyn felt like she was in control. No more doubts, no more fears. Just the hum of the engine and the certainty of the moment. The wind howled as Evelyn guided the Apache into the sky. Her focus narrowed to a pinpoint as the desert below shrank further away. The faint hum of the engine was like a heartbeat in her chest, syncing with her breathing, steadying her nerves. The mission was underway. Ahead of her, the horizon was dotted with the faint silhouettes of enemy aircraft, two fast movers. Her mind raced, calculating the approach, adjusting her flight path as she locked her eyes on the targets. She'd trained for this moment. She had everything she needed to succeed. But that nagging doubt she couldn't shake? It lingered like an old friend she didn't want. You've got this, she thought, trying to steady her breath. But the reality was different from the practice drills. There were no simulations here. This was real. Real lives, real danger. Rogue, watch your speed. Link's voice cut through the radio, snapping her out of her thoughts. You're closing in too fast. You need a clear shot, not just a rush. Evelyn blinked, taking a quick glance at the readouts. She had been so focused on the enemy, she hadn't noticed her speed creeping higher than intended. A quick pull of the stick, and the Apache leveled out. Roger that, she replied, trying to regain her composure. She could feel her palms starting to sweat around the controls. The mission wasn't just about speed or aggression, it was about precision. Watch your six, Rogue. Brad's voice suddenly blasted through the comm, his tone condescending. You're way too close to that fighter. You're about to. The transmission cut out, and for a split second, Evelyn was alone with her thoughts, the hum of the Apache growing louder in her ears. She focused on the enemy targets ahead, but her pulse quickened, and her hands felt slick with sweat. She'd already made a mistake. She had to correct it before it became something worse. The two enemy jets were still heading toward her, and the closer they came, the more Evelyn's hands trembled. She knew she needed to make a decision. She had seconds before they would be within missile range. Focus, she told herself again. Just focus. Her breath hitched in her throat as she pulled back on the stick, trying to position herself for a better angle. But as she did, she felt the Apache wobble slightly. Something wasn't right. Her concentration faltered as a sharp warning beep sounded in her headset. Her speed had dipped too low as she tried to maneuver. Damn it, she muttered, forcing the Apache back into line. Rogue, you're losing altitude. Link's voice was now firm, sharp with concern. You need to regain control. Now. Evelyn's heart pounded in her chest, and her vision blurred at the edges. The wobble of the Apache sent a wave of panic through her, but she gritted her teeth, pushing against the rising tide of fear. She corrected her speed, but it wasn't enough. The first mistake was out there, hanging in the air like a cloud. The fighter jets were still closing in fast, and the Apache wasn't in the ideal position for a counterstrike. Evelyn's stomach twisted. She could feel the eyes of the team on her, even though they weren't physically with her. Focus, Evelyn, she whispered to herself, as if the words could chase the uncertainty away. The Apache stabilized, but the damage was done. The mistake had been made, and there was no taking it back. Just as she was about to radio in her next move, the air was split by the sudden blare of a missile lock warning. Evelyn's heart slammed in her chest. It's not over. Not yet. Rogue, you're being locked on. Link's voice cut through the panic in her head. You've got to make your move, or this is gonna be it. Evelyn's heart raced as the missile lock warning blared in her headset. The relentless sound pulsed in her ears, drowning out everything else. She stared at the radar, her fingers gripping the controls so tightly her knuckles went white. She was falling behind. Every second felt like an eternity. The enemy jets were closing in, and she could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. Come on, she muttered under her breath, fighting the instinct to panic. The Apache bucked beneath her, the turbulence almost too much to bear. Focus, Evelyn, she told herself, trying to ignore the tightening grip of fear in her chest. Rogue, you've got to take action now. Link's voice cut through the static, his tone sharp with urgency. We're running out of time. The pressure was suffocating. Her first mistake had set the stage for this, and now she was spiraling. The locked missile wasn't just a warning, it was a countdown. This is it, she thought, her mind racing as she pulled the Apache into a steep climb, hoping to break the lock. But her stomach lurched as the force of the GS pushed her down in the seat, her body screaming in protest. Don't choke now, David, she whispered to herself. The words tasted bitter, but she couldn't let the doubt take over. Not now. The Apache groaned, the engine straining as she pushed it to its limits. She could feel the weight of the aircraft, the machinery groaning beneath the intensity of the turn. What if I can't handle this? What if I fail? A brief flash of her father's disappointed face crossed her mind, his voice telling her she wasn't cut out for this. You're too small. You're too weak. The thought made her stomach twist. She shook her head, trying to force the memory away, but it wouldn't go. She wasn't her father's disappointment. She had worked her entire life to get here, to prove everyone wrong. But now, on the edge of failure, she couldn't help but wonder, what if they were right? Her hands were slick with sweat, her breath shallow. She could hear the warning lights flashing in the cockpit, feel the Apache shudder beneath her. She could practically see Brad's smirk in her mind, hear him whispering that she wasn't cut out for this. No, she thought, fighting back the panic. Not today. I won't let them win. She yanked the controls, pulling the Apache into a hard dive to evade the incoming missile. The wind screamed past her ears as the aircraft plummeted. For a moment, she lost all sense of gravity, the force of the dive feeling like a punch to her gut. The missile lock warning faded, but her heart didn't slow. She had evaded it for now. But the tension in her chest remained. Rogue, you good? Link's voice crackled in her headset again. Evelyn gritted her teeth, trying to keep her voice steady. Yeah, I'm fine. I got this. But did she? The question gnawed at her as she leveled the Apache, pulling it back onto course. The reality of the mission hit her all over again. This wasn't just about proving herself to the others, it was about proving to herself that she wasn't a failure. That she had earned her place. You're not weak, she told herself. You're stronger than they think. She took another deep breath and fixed her eyes on the enemy jets ahead, focusing on the task at hand. She couldn't afford to second-guess herself any longer. But the mission wasn't over. The danger was still there. The pressure was still on. And with it came the question, was she truly ready to face what came next? Evelyn's hands were no longer shaking, but her nerves were still raw. The Apache felt like an extension of her own body now, the vibrations of the machine syncing with her heartbeat. She had evaded the missile lock, but the enemy jets were still on her tail, and the mission wasn't over yet. Her eyes scanned the horizon, darting between the two fighter jets that were now positioning themselves for another pass. They were faster than anything she'd ever encountered. She had to move quickly, but not recklessly. She could feel the weight of every decision now, the knowledge that one wrong move could cost everything. Rogue, you've got 2 on your 6. Link's voice crackled over the comm, don't panic, just focus. Got it, she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. Inside, though, she was anything but calm. Focus, she told herself again. You've done this 100 times. She gripped the controls and yanked the Apache into a hard right, banking around to shake off the incoming fighters. The G-forces hit her like a freight train, but she gritted her teeth and pushed through it. The Apache groaned under the pressure, but it responded to her commands like an old friend. She knew it inside and out, every creak of the cockpit, every hum of the engine. The fighter jets were close now, too close. She could see the pilots inside their cockpits, their eyes focused on her, knowing they had her in their sights. They'd try to lock onto her again. She had no doubt about that. Think, she reminded herself. Think, Evelyn. You've got this. She glanced at the radar and saw the blip of one jet coming in fast from the left. It was too close to avoid with a simple turn. She had to outmaneuver it quickly. In one fluid motion, she pulled back on the stick, sending the Apache into a steep climb. Her stomach lurched, and for a moment, the world tilted sideways as the helicopter shot upward. She could feel the weight of the GS pushing against her body, but she didn't flinch. She had trained for this moment. The fighter jet streaked past her, narrowly missing her by mere feet. The air seemed to freeze for a split second, the sound of the jet's engines roaring past her ears. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat as the Apache leveled out, the fighter jet now behind her. The moment hung in the air, still and silent. Nice move, Rogue, Link's voice broke through the tension. You're not playing around. A flush of pride spread through her chest, but there was no time to dwell on it. The other enemy fighter was still in the fight. Evelyn quickly flipped the Apache back to face it, her mind sharp now, focused solely on the task. The confidence she had been lacking earlier surged back. She was no longer thinking about Brad's snide remarks or the doubts that had plagued her. Now it was just her and the enemy. The second jet closed in, but this time Evelyn was ready. She didn't hesitate. She pulled the Apache into a sharp roll, letting the fighter jet pass right below her. The move was risky, but Evelyn knew it was her only chance to avoid being locked on again. The enemy fighter flew directly beneath her, and in that split second, she knew she had the upper hand. She dropped the Apache into a dive, aiming directly at the jet. "Fox 3, she muttered under her breath, sending a guided missile streaking toward the fighter. The explosion was deafening in her headphones as the missile found its target. The fighter was hit, spiraling out of control and crashing to the ground below. Evelyn exhaled, feeling a surge of relief flood her chest, but there was no time to relax. The mission was far from over, and the other jet wasn't done yet. She quickly turned her attention back to the skies, eyes scanning for the next challenge. But one thing was certain now, she had proven herself. Not to Brad, not to the others, but to herself. She was capable. She had earned her place. The Apache soared higher, the engine roaring beneath Evelyn as she leveled out after the dive. Her breath came in steady, deep pulls, but her mind was sharper than ever. The first jet was down. The second one was still out there, somewhere in the chaos of the desert sky. But Evelyn was done hesitating. She took a quick glance at the radar, nothing. The second fighter had vanished. She scanned the sky for any sign of movement, her pulse quickening. "Where did you go?" "Rogue, you got a visual on that second one?" Link's voice cut through the static, sharp with urgency. "I'm looking," Evelyn replied, eyes darting over the controls, the sky, every piece of equipment in the cockpit. "Come on, where are you?" The seconds felt like minutes. Every flap of the rotor seemed amplified in her ears, the low hum vibrating through her body. She tried to shake off the nerves, but the pressure was still there. Her hands were steady on the controls, but inside, doubts started to creep back in. Her mind flashed to the moments before the fight, Brad's mocking tone, the team's disapproval, the way they'd all looked at her like she didn't belong in the cockpit of an Apache. But she was here. She had proven that she was just as capable as anyone else. The fighter jet appeared in the distance, coming in from the left side this time. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat as her hands moved with practiced speed, adjusting the controls. She couldn't afford another mistake. She had to do this right. "Rogue, he's coming in hot." Link's warning made her heart race. The fighter was diving toward her, and she had seconds to react. Evelyn banked hard to the right, throwing the Apache into a tight turn. The G-forces pressed against her chest, but she was ready. This time, she didn't hesitate. She wasn't going to be the one to run away anymore. Come on," she muttered under her breath, eyes locked on the incoming jet. She could hear the whine of the engine as the enemy pilot closed in. She wasn't just fighting for the mission anymore. She was fighting for herself, for every doubt she'd ever had to face. As the fighter drew closer, Evelyn made her move. She dove, not to evade, but to get below the jet, to use the terrain as cover. The Apache seemed to respond as if it could feel her determination, roaring as it shot downward toward the desert below. For a moment, it felt like everything froze, the world went still, and time itself seemed to stretch. The Apache was coming up under the enemy jet in perfect alignment. She pulled the trigger. The missile streaked forward, lighting up the sky as it connected with the jet. The explosion was deafening, the fireball lighting up the desert beneath them. Evelyn didn't look back. She couldn't. But the feeling of her missile hitting its mark, the victory, surged through her, calming the storm inside her for just a moment. "Rogue, you did it!" Link shouted, and Evelyn could hear the excitement in his voice. "That's how it's done." A grin spread across her face, but she didn't let herself get lost in it. The mission wasn't over yet. She still had to get back to base. Still had to prove that she could handle whatever came next. But in this moment, Evelyn knew something had changed. She had stepped into the fight, and she had come out on top. She wasn't the rookie anymore. She was Evelyn David, and nothing was going to stop her now. As the Apache climbed back into the sky, heading for home, she let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. There was a long way to go, but for the first time since she'd gotten into the cockpit, Evelyn felt like she belonged. The Apache descended slowly, its blades cutting through the sky in rhythmic precision. Below, the base came into view, the vast desert stretching for miles. The weight of the mission's success was beginning to settle on Evelyn's shoulders, but with it came an unexpected sense of uncertainty. She had done it. She had taken down 2 enemy fighters, proven herself under pressure, and completed the mission. It should have felt like a victory. In many ways, it was. The adrenaline still buzzed in her veins, her heart beating in time with the helicopter's hum. But as the Apache neared the runway, her mind began to wander, to question everything she'd fought so hard to achieve. As the wheels hit the ground, a cheer erupted over the comms. "Nice job, Rogue. You nailed it." Link's voice rang out, full of excitement. Even Brad, who had been quiet throughout the mission, was now shouting over the radio, "You're a damn good pilot, David. Damn good." Evelyn forced a smile. She couldn't help it. Hearing their praise should have been the best feeling in the world. After all, she'd spent so long trying to earn this respect, this acknowledgement. But it didn't feel like enough. She taxied the Apache toward the hangar, her mind still racing. "Is this it?" she asked herself. The words rang in her head, heavy and undeniable. "Is this all there is?" She shut the engine down and climbed out of the cockpit, feeling the heat of the desert air on her skin. The base was buzzing with activity. Crew members were hurrying to handle the helicopter, mechanics moving quickly, technicians with their clipboards and radios. Everyone seemed to have a job, a purpose. Everyone but her. As she stood there, watching the ground crew approach, her chest tightened. She could feel the eyes of the team on her as they walked by, some of them nodding, others whispering. There was respect in their looks, but it felt distant, almost like a polite formality rather than true acceptance. Brad approached her, his hands in his pockets, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You really pulled it off, huh?" he said, his voice light, but there was something in his tone that Evelyn didn't trust. "Yeah," she replied, trying to keep the edge out of her voice. "Guess I did." Brad's grin widened. "You know, I wasn't sure you had it in you. But you proved me wrong. You're all right, David." He clapped her on the back, hard enough to make her stumble slightly. Evelyn didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The praise was shallow, a hollow acknowledgement that, for some reason, didn't feel earned. She didn't want to be all right in his eyes. She didn't want to be just good enough anymore. She wanted to be more than that. As she walked away from Brad, her thoughts tangled into a mess of confusion. She had faced her doubts, defeated her inner demons, and performed beyond anyone's expectations, but now that she had done it, she was left with a question. What now? Her footsteps were slow, deliberate, as she made her way toward the barracks. Her uniform felt heavier with every step, as if it carried more weight than it should. She could hear the voices of the others behind her, still celebrating her success. But inside, she was empty. Her victory was bittersweet, a hollow trophy with no meaning beyond the moment. Evelyn stopped at the door of her room, her hand resting on the handle. She had proven herself to the world, but had she proven anything to herself? The early morning sunlight slanted through the window, casting a golden glow across Evelyn's bunk. The quiet hum of the bass in the distance felt like an anchor, grounding her after the storm of the past few days. The Apache mission was behind her, but the echo of it lingered, both in the praise from her team and the uncertainty that had settled in her mind. But now, as she stood in front of the mirror, the weight of the world seemed a little lighter. Her uniform felt different today. She wasn't just wearing it as a shield or a way to prove herself anymore. This time, it fit. A soft knock on the door pulled her from her thoughts. She turned to see Link standing in the doorway, leaning against the frame with a casual smile. "Got a minute?" he asked, a friendly but unspoken urgency in his tone. "Yeah, sure," Evelyn said, gesturing for him to come in. Link stepped inside, his eyes scanning the room before landing on her. I wanted to say, well, great job out there, he said, scratching the back of his neck. You really impressed everyone. Especially with the way you handled that last move. Evelyn nodded, her smile almost automatic. Thanks, Link. He hesitated before speaking again, his eyes serious now. But I wanted to tell you something that no one else has said. He paused, choosing his words carefully. You've earned your place here. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise. You've been holding back, even with all the praise. And it's time you let yourself accept that you belong. You're not just a good pilot. You're one of the best. Evelyn's chest tightened at his words. There it was again, the recognition she hadn't truly allowed herself to accept. She looked away, her throat tight. I don't know, she started, her voice quieter than usual. It feels different. The praise, I mean. I don't know if I feel like I really earned it. Link tilted his head, narrowing his eyes. That's the thing, Evelyn. You've spent so long proving yourself to everyone else that you've forgotten to prove it to yourself. You're not trying to make anyone else happy anymore. You're doing this for you. Her eyes met his, the weight of his words sinking in. For the first time, Evelyn felt a shift inside her, a slow, almost imperceptible understanding that she had indeed done this for herself. Not for Brad, or the team, or anyone else who doubted her. She had done it because she could. Because she was capable. A quiet laugh escaped her lips, the sound foreign but welcome. I guess I have been my own worst enemy, huh? She said, her voice light but thoughtful. Link grinned, shrugging his shoulders. Hey, we all are at times. But you've come a long way, Evelyn. Don't shortchange yourself. You've earned this. All of it. Evelyn stood there for a moment, letting the words sink in. For the first time since she'd set foot on the base, she realized she wasn't just filling a role. She wasn't a rookie trying to prove herself, or a woman fighting against stereotypes. She was Evelyn David, an Apache pilot. And no one could take that from her. Thanks, Link, she said, finally feeling the weight of his words settle into her. He gave her a knowing nod. Anytime, Rogue. Anytime. As Link left the room, Evelyn stood in front of the mirror once more. This time, she didn't just see the uniform, she saw the pilot who had earned her place, who had proven herself not to anyone else, but to herself. She wasn't a rookie anymore. She was a force to be reckoned with. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy. There would be more challenges, more obstacles to overcome. But Evelyn knew one thing for sure, she was ready. She had embraced her identity, and nothing would shake her confidence again. The woman in the mirror smiled back at her, and this time, the smile was real. If Evelyn's journey of self-discovery resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Sometimes, the hardest battles are the ones we fight within ourselves. Let's keep inspiring each other.